Great. Well, we will go ahead and get started with today's session. So thank you for joining us for part one of today's three-part series. This session is Start Now in Government Contracting, Conducting Market Research with our Apex Accelerator Director, Kelly. This meeting is being recorded, so you will have access to the recording following the session, and that will be sent out via email, so you can go back and re-listen to anything. And you will also get a PDF copy of the presentation so that you can review that as needed too. I will include all information in the follow-up email about how to register as a client if you are looking for additional assistance via Kelly in our Apex Accelerator Center. We do ask that you submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar via the chat. And then once Kelly is done with her presentation, we will address any of those that have been submitted. So please feel free to submit them at any time throughout the webinar, and then we will address them following the presentation. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Kelly and we can get started.
Good morning, Jordan. Thank you so much. So welcome to all. The session today is on market research. And again, I'm Keli Krueger-Huhra, and I am the director of the Illinois Apex Accelerator at the Champaign County Economic Development Corporation. And there's my contact information on the first slide. So in case we've reached you and you're not familiar with the Apex Accelerator, if you'd allow me to just give you a brief overview of what it is we do and how you can connect with us. We're 97 centers across the United States. We have some centers that serve an entire state, some local regions, and we also have Native American centers that help the Native-owned businesses. But basically, we're 600 contracting experts across the country, and we assist over 50,000 businesses each year. And why this matters is I have a network that I have access to that can give us assistance. When we come across something that we're not familiar with, we have many resources that we can connect and reach out to. And basically, we are under the management of the Department of Defense, the Office of Small Business Programs specifically. And our Apex accelerators are looked at as the front door to get you into the government contracting space. And that is the will of the agencies is to expand the number of businesses that are ready, capable to pursue and perform under contracts, not only with the Department of Defense, who provides the funding for the services, which are no fee to our clients through the National Defense Authorization Act, but all the other federal agencies, the state agencies, local governments, if it's government related, including government prime contractors looking for subs, we can assist. And what we want to do is provide education, like what we're doing today, training, one-on-one counseling for those businesses that want to work with government agencies and achieve those procurement contracts. And the Illinois Apex Accelerators will help to generate the suppliers that will move the federal, state, and local agencies forward for a more resilient, a stronger industrial base. Greater competition. And as you know, as business owners, when you have competition, you get higher quality goods at a lower cost for you, the taxpayers. So this is just an idea of the services that we can provide. Market research, which is front and center of what we're doing today, helping you find those government opportunities. And the next session we'll talk about is establishing relationships with the agencies. Many people have heard of SAM.gov. If you're not already in there and you want to do federal contracting, you will be in SAM with an entity registration, and talk about all the other registrations that are required when you look at not only federal, but state contracting and local as well. Helping you find businesses to connect with through networking opportunities. When you do get into the government space and you do find those solicitations, how do you bid on those? We're going to have a session in January talking about the solicitations and what those look like. Understanding that there are certifications, and we're not going to touch on that much today other than to introduce that set aside market for you. But what does it take to apply to get certified? And then, bid conferences, other, bid opportunities that are done electronically as well as in SAM.gov. And so you can see on the right then just some statistics that you can see how we do help clients to the extent of winning contracts and creating jobs and saving jobs in the communities that we're located in. And that's really what it's all about. If by chance we have reached you through social media and you're maybe not in the central Illinois area, we are located in 11 centers across the state of Illinois. And here's just a picture of the centers. We are heavy in the Chicagoland area. I cover all of central Illinois through the Champaign County EDC. And then we have 2 centers in southern Illinois. Okay, so I want to just briefly introduce the session for today. What are we going to accomplish? We're going to understand how to conduct market research, the importance of market research, why it is mission critical when we look at opportunities in this space, and the basics of competitive analysis. Now, we are going to focus on the federal marketplace today. Consider the key factors to examine the industry that you're working in. We like to call that a SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, both in the industry and in your own business as well. So the main focus is going to be on those data tools, those all-important tools like SAM.gov's data bank and USA Spending, PDS. We're going to touch on all of those in some detail, and that's going to help us determine which agencies are buying. How much are they buying? The use of the set-aside marketplace, again, we just mentioned certifications, and what's your competition doing, which is hugely important. And then we're going to provide some suggestions on capturing those results to develop a marketing plan. Okay, so many of you may be familiar with this business model, Canvas. Many of you, especially if you've worked with a small business development center, this is where it all starts. So we're going to look at where you're initially starting from in your current market value proposition, which for many of you is probably experience in with business to consumers and business to business. And that experience you bring forward then to the government marketplace. So it's important for you as a business that's going to be working with, for example, an assist agency like an Apex Accelerator, to understand where are you at today in your current marketplace and how that moves forward into how you solve problems now for government agencies. What are your solutions? What are your differentiators? In other words, why would I do business with you versus your competition? And that's going to be important when we go into the third session, getting a little bit ahead, but we're going to do capability statements. And the capability statements have 3 main focuses, and one of them will be your differentiators, allowing you to sell yourself to the government agencies. And then if you're talking with a government agency, how do you explain the return on investment they're going to get out of doing business with you? Okay, so first and foremost, is government contracting right for you? So we're going to look at, does the government buy the product or service that you sell? Today in this webinar, we're going to explore that. But in general, are you capable of fulfilling a government contract? Be honest with yourself. Do that SWOT analysis. Do you have the capital that it's going to take? Do you have the time to invest in setting yourself up for success? Do you have the staff? Do you have the materials available to you? Can you demonstrate the third factor in a capability statement is past performance? Can you tell those government agencies that you have some demonstrated examples of business? Again, it might be business to consumer, might be business to business, but you have that experience that you bring with you. Does your business generate revenue? Are you credit worthy? Do you have an existing relationship with a bank, a lending institution? Very important, because at the end of the day, you're going to need to finance those contracts, and there may be some carrying time, waiting for the government to pay what you've already been obligated to pay for before you get their funding. So, do you have that operational capacity for fulfillment at scale? What's your ramp up time? The lead time on the contract is 30 days. Can you be ready and meet that obligation in that 30-day window? Do you have cash on hand? Again, that financial capacity to purchase inventory if you've got to carry that for a period of time? Can you meet the eligibility requirements such as insurance and bonding? If you're in construction, you understand there are going to be bonding levels based on your capacity to finance, and at what level can you be looking at contracts in that correspond to the level of bonding that you're capable to get. And do you already have some contracting experience? That's very important as well. So now we're going to talk about agency contracting opportunities. So now we're going to move to that target buyer being um, government agencies. So it's important to understand the customer base from the very beginning. So we're going to gather information on the opportunities and limitations for gaining customers. So we're going to consider these factors as an understanding of this market and the industry as well as your competitors. So what we're going to find when we do this market research is market size. So the intent would be to identify at least three to four federal agencies that look like there's an opportunity to sell your product to them, your product or your service. So we're going to look at how often are they buying, if they are buying it, which is very important, and an economic indicator of how are they buying. Okay, the purchasing process, how much are they buying? What type of contract are they using to make those purchases? What are the agency's problems and needs? And how do we address those back to our value proposition? And what plans, what primes are out there? Because subcontracting is an excellent way to get started in the federal marketplace. So when you look at how often they're buying, how much are they buying? How are they buying? That is considered propensity. In other words, if this is a market for me, I need to know to what extent do I go after those 3 to 4 agencies because their propensity is a return on investment for me in my time and resources. Okay, so I want to just back this up again in wanting you to understand what you're going to find in these databases. Let's start very basically with the acquisition. So you're going to find a strategic collective effort by the agencies, and we want to designate and understand which agencies those are to obtain those supplies and services from the business owner via a contract. So identifying that need, developing the requirements, it's going to be spelled out in that solicitation. Includes the strategic management of how these new capabilities and requirements are generated. So we look at this in two ways. The acquisition encompasses the contracting and the procurement process. So to understand that this formal documentation that you're going to see is the way they're obtaining the supplies and services from you as a business. And the description is what you're going to find in the solicitation and what we're going to find in the data that we're going to mine in these databases. And that's going to be very important because you're going to find that your codes that you use, your NACE codes, and even to the extent of if you look at state contracting and IGP codes, those descriptions of services, the industry can be very broad, but what they're buying will be specific. And that's going to be important information to understand to get past just the generality of the industry of the NACE code. And procurement, that's the process. And that's very important because in federal contracting, state contracting, there's transparency required as they spend your tax dollars. So that procurement process will be referred to as we go through the data. But it's separate. It's part of the acquisition process, but it doesn't include that strategic management of the acquisition itself. So the only reason I point out here on the acquisition team that what's important to understand is what you're going to see in the data are contracting officers and contracting officer representatives. Contracting officers, they are the only ones that have authority to actually purchase something from a non-government entity such as yourself, from a business. They have delegated authority. They have warrants at different levels of what they can based on their levels of responsibility, different dollar amounts. They are the only ones that could ever award you a contract or change a contract. So when you're fortunate enough to get in the government space and have a contract, just be aware that if someone tries to tell you, for example, program manager or contracting officer representative, they try to get you to do something outside of the contract. Never, because the contracting officers are the only ones that are going to authorize payment for you. The others may ask you, it may end up being a favor because if it hasn't come through a contracting officer, it's not official. And so we're going to see those individuals in these the resources that we look at on each specific contract. And I want you to understand too that what we're going to talk about in our next section about developing our market strategy, there are those that are much easier to get a hold of that will advocate and liaison for you as a small business owner to get to these contracting officers who are very busy in issuing solicitations, one right after the other. And they're hard to connect with, but we've got others that we'll look at in a strategy that we can make inroads into the contracting officers. Okay, so now let's go to an understanding of, again, when we see these data that see the results of the searches that we do, just understand that there is something called a micro purchase threshold, and that is under $10,000. And one of the bits of data that we can mine is who has a purchasing contract, purchasing card, and those are agreements, sales under $10,000, much more loosely defined, and agencies are able to contact you directly for something under $10,000, where your simplified acquisition threshold between $10,000 and $250,000, those are going to be posted. That's the data that we're going to see. But we'll see where we can run a report to find those purchases under $10,000 on the micro purchase threshold and be able to find warrants of less than $10,000 on those procurement cards. And the government is intentional about using small business, and those are between the 10,000 and 250,000. Those are always set aside, as you see here in red. Any acquisition as well over the simplified acquisition threshold, over $250,000, will be set aside for small business when there's a reasonable expectation that offers will be obtained from at least two responsible business concerns, and award will be made at a fair market price. So you have intentional set-asides, shall set aside between 10,000 and 250,000, and then the intent to set aside if these other two factors can be met if it's over 250,000. That's referred to as the rule of two. Okay. Now, I mentioned the set-aside program. Again, when you're looking at the data, one thing you're going to see is set-aside categories. And what that means is if you have certified through the Small Business Administration in these categories, you are eligible to bid on those solicitations. If you have not, those are restricted and you would be in just the total small business category. So you have women-owned small business, you have the small disadvantaged business, which includes the 8A, and that's 12% of the marketplace. 3% for HUB-zone businesses and 3% for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Again, these are all a certification that you do, except for the small disadvantaged business. That is a self-certification. So you understand what the guidelines are and you declare that. The 8A is a certification business development program. And you'll see, visually on this pie chart, those blue sections are taken out of the full and open marketplace. Those are restricted to those that have that certification. Okay, and the agencies do care. You see it noted in the data because it is tracked. And this is just an example, just a snapshot in fiscal year 23. small business, small disadvantaged business, woman-owned, hub-zone, service disabled. Those are the percentages, the minimum percentages that the agencies are tasked with. And then there's a report card that says how they're doing. And so it is very important. The SBA grades that. If they're doing well, that's great. If they're not, then they are coached to help them find a deeper bench in the categories where they are lagging. Okay, and there's just an example, Department of Defense, their scorecard, and then they're tracking to their goals, and they're also giving a comparison of previous years. So that's just a little snapshot. Now we're going to go into the market research. Okay, all important. Where do we find the data? So we're going to talk about three main systems today, and these are open market, no fee systems that anyone can sign in and take a look at to get this information that you're looking for. And I want to note that we're going to go through these individually, but together, they're going to give you more success. When you take the data from one system and you understand how these systems are used and how you are able to use them, you're going to find that you may find a data point in the Federal Procurement Data System or SAM.gov or USA Spending, and you want to know more about it. Maybe you can find more contract data, specific data, because you've already made a connection with a solicitation through the Federal Procurement Data System. So you may take information from one and use it in another to complete the picture. So keep in mind, it's not, the USA Spending is by many considered to be a one-stop shop, but really your best benefit is using data from one system and expanding on it in another system. And that's something that kind of comes organically as you start understanding the systems that are presented here. You can sort by many ways, and we'll see that in the filters that are provided, but we could sort by NACE codes if you already know those. Now, again, the I in NACE is industry, so they can be very broad. So when you want to filter down, maybe keywords in the case of your commodity or service, maybe just a description is going to be better. And you'll see that as well. Maybe you just have already targeted your agencies and you know right where you're going to go, sort by agencies. That's a faster sort, and let's get rid of the noise. Let's just go right to the agencies that we want to work with. Maybe you have a contracting office. There are contracting offices located in this area in Central Illinois. Maybe you want to go directly to them. You want to find out what they're buying. If they're buying what you're selling, that's a quick win because you're in the neighborhood, basically. You can connect directly with them where others are more distant. Keeping in mind that contracting offices, for example, USDA office in Peoria, they contract across the Midwest, Iowa, Minnesota. And just because the contracting location is here, doesn't necessarily the place of performance is here as well. It could be anywhere. We can sort by where you need to work if you are restricted in your region, but just keep in mind that it's not as important as where the contracting office is located, but where the work is going to be performed. And contractors, if you're looking for prime contractors, if you're trying to data mine your competitors and who they're already connecting with as far as the agencies go, or if you're looking for teaming partners, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. Another resource is the GSA e-library for a couple of different reasons. Number one, GSA schedules. If you find in your data mining that your potential customer is using GSA schedules for the bulk of their purchases, then that's where we're going to go. You can also find competitor information on a GSA e-library site and the pricing tool for competitive pricing data. You can find out what the government is willing to buy for on that competitive pricing data resource. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sam.gov. That was the first one on the list, and we're going to get specific into sam.gov is a resource you hear about all the time to find opportunities. Those are yours described down here under the sam.gov visual, current and near-term opportunities. Okay, if you wanted to go out and try to see what was open today to bid on, you could find that in SAM. But I want you to set that aside right now and not look at SAM as current and near-term opportunities, but I want you to focus on SAM as a research module. And SAM.gov has something called a data bank. And that data bank is where we're going to find those archived actions. So this is what we want right now. We don't want to know necessarily what's today because maybe they're not buying it today. We want to know what the past history and the opportunity for future purchases is more so than we want to know right now in research, current and near-term opportunities. So SAM is also considered, and they have tried to make it more of a one-stop shop for your entity registration and your contract opportunities. But right now, contract opportunities means market research. So that data bank that you see referenced here, and it's one of the clickable boxes that are on the top. That's where your data is going to come. So if a contract action is valued at $10,000, modifications as well, we're going to be able to find those in the data bank. And there are 90 plus agencies that write contracts that are going to be found in there. So this is a visual. If you click on, again, that screen shot that says data bank up here, if you click on that, these are pre-established data reports. So these are reports that you don't have to create yourself. There is something called an ad hoc report. You see that on the left-hand side. Always look for your filters. They are a bit cumbersome to create, and generally speaking, any data you want to collect, you can probably find a report that's in this data bank. It's already been set up for you. If you wanted to get fancy, you could do an ad hoc report. They are a bit cumbersome, I will admit that. I don't try them many times because it does take a few steps to do it. But don't worry about that because generally speaking, most of these reports that are already in here, you're going to find useful and will get you the information you're looking for. This report that I have highlighted here, small business goaling. I can get a report that tells me, you saw that scorecard earlier, how the businesses are doing on meeting those 23% small business goals. Now, 5% women owned. Maybe I pull up an agency and I see that they've only achieved 3% of their goals so far. So their 5% metric. So an optimist would say, wow, their bench isn't very deep in women-owned small businesses. If I am one, I may try to, move that ball forward a little bit with them and maybe emphasize a little bit more so, not only my capabilities, but the fact that I'm a woman-owned small business. Now, there is, the competing one, the pessimist would say, well, they're just not very interested in doing business with women-owned small businesses. I'd rather think that it's just that they need more opportunities to source with women-owned small businesses. But that's just an example of a report. And so if you're looking at an agency, you go in and you look at how they're doing to their goals, it could reinforce that, yes, that is an agency. If you have that, again, that certification, that you want to target them as one of your 3 or 4. Okay, now, so that's sam.gov. What we're looking at here is USA spending. Again, there are many in the industry that will consider this a one-stop shop. They love the data that comes out of here. Okay, this is just a visual of the opening screen. Again, we're going to focus on prior awards, long-term trends, and what is the competitive landscape looking for? We also always want to look at when we're doing our market research, are there some contracts that are going to be expiring? Sometimes contracts can be set up for 3 years, 5 years, and are you on the cusp of 6 months from now, you're finding a contract that's a target agency and it's going to expire? This would be the time that you want to start again, getting a little bit ahead of your market strategy. This would be the time that you start making the inroads with that agency. making that introduction, having them get to know you, having them understand what your capabilities are. They potentially even you've had a capability briefing with them, but those expiring contracts give you the option to go in early, understand that it's coming, do your homework so that the agency knows that you're right there, you're ready to go. And you're just, taking the opportunity to build that relationship with the agency. Okay, so on USA spending, you can get data in a couple of different forms. Now, one way that you're going to look at your search, again, say by a keyword. So in this case, you put in a keyword and you see those filters on the left. Filters are your friend. They are very important because you're looking at historic data. If you pull out 10 years of data, you could get thousands of contracts. Does it make sense for you to try to screen and go through thousands of contracts? No. But if you sort now, maybe you want that kind of history, or maybe you're looking at a commodity or service that is rarely purchased. So you need to get more from a timing perspective. Maybe you need to open up your timeline. But say you want to see really what are they currently buying? What did they buy last year? Maybe even the couple of years before. But you can define that fiscal year, and understand too, a fiscal year for the federal government starts on October 1st and runs through September 30th. So if you click a fiscal year, that's the time period that you're going to get. That may or may not matter, but I just want to make that clear. So define your fiscal year. Say, just give me the most current information that's out there. Understanding that it takes a long time to wrap up the year. So the year that ended 9/30 of 2024, it will be a while before that data is available. So fiscal year 23 might be the most current data that you're going to get. Likely it is, with some exceptions. But just to find, use your keyword, use your time period. Again, if you're a woman-owned small business or an 8A certified business, sort by those set asides. Understand who's buying for the not only the small business, but the further set asides of the certified businesses. Okay, those are all things that you can filter for. And the other thing about USA spending is this is just, one of the data points that you're going to get when you do that sort. It's automatically going to populate. If you want to say, how much money are they spending in the state of Illinois? Is this a market where there's a lot, is that a place of performance where a lot of contracts are being performed, where money is being spent? There's a little a little code over here, a little table. It tells you what the colors mean. So you can get a quick visual. Again, you can just hover over this and it's going to give you a dollar value of what is being spent. And when I say clickable, if you see across on top of the map here, these different table, time, map, categories, these will allow you to quickly format the data in different ways without having to go back every time and recreate it or use new filters, eliminate old filters. You can get this quickly by clicking on these categories that are here at the top. And then, of course, your filters on the side panel allow you easily to select what that data is going to look like. So the charts and graphs, everything is clickable on here. And that's why many businesses will find usaspending.gov as a great resource to get that data and filter it out. Now, you also will be able to download the data. You'll see that in many instances, you can click on download and get Excel spreadsheets. And Excel spreadsheets, if you take it to the next level, you can do pivot tables. So now you're really manipulating that data to find, the information that is most critical to you. And when you, do these downloads, you're going to get contracting officers. So you're going to get, and especially if you're using recent data. Now, keep in mind, contracting officers, and they're the ones, again, that have purchasing authority. They're the decision makers. As part of an acquisition team, you're going to get people, actual information, contact information, in many cases, email addresses of those that you know are buying. Now, again, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of a contracting officer, but no matter, we have um, offices of small and disadvantaged business utilization, small business professionals, small business liaison officers. We have people we can connect to get to those contracting officers. But now, when we capture the data, we've got the names of the people we know are buying for their agencies. Okay. Now, I want to show you too another way that you're going to get data presented to you, and that is in a bar graph. Okay. So we looked at it by state. We can also look at it by spending in this way, where we can visually see, wow, we've got the highest level of spend with the Department of Health and Human Services. We've got the Social Security Administration. So again, when we're looking to target 3 to 4, well, are any of these? Well, we've got some major players, with the Department of Health and Human Services and Social Security Administration. They are really, if that's a market that we can get into, they're really heavy users of, I believe I sorted for adhesives in this case. But again, we want to filter this down and make this useful data for us. But this is just an overall visual. Now, the next we're going to look at is the Federal Procurement Data System. Okay, I'm going to get the same information, and the reason I brought this screen up first, the Federal Procurement Data System, NG, this is the OG of data search. So this database has been around for a while. I mean, you can kind of tell that just by the visual on the screen. It's an older database, but this is the authoritative source for SAM.gov and USAspending.gov. So the information that populates in those other two databases pulls from this database. They're trying to switch everything over. They've switched those reports that we just looked at in SAM.gov. They have switched those, taken those out of this FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System, Next Generation, and put those into SAM. But we can still find a lot of useful data. And I will admit, I use this one probably as much, if not more, than the other two to find the data I'm looking for. But again, it is really about a combination of all three to maximize the information that's out there. Now, what I want to show you is when we looked at this previous screen, we saw a graph that looks like this. This was usaspending.gov. Now, when you look at this screen, here's the same information as far as the top 10 agencies that's buying this product. However, it's formatted much differently. So if you look at the blue arrows on the left, there are the top 10 department full names. Okay? It's not a graph, it's just a listing. So in this case, the search that we did was on actually STEM. Now, be careful because you will find that these databases will pick up a vendor by the name of STEM. Now, chances are if STEM's in the name, they may be selling, STEM type products. But in this case, the name is STEM, so it's picked up, and it may or may not actually be the commodity or service that we're looking to see if it was purchased. Okay, but in this case, the blue arrow and the first blue arrow show you these are the departments, full name, that purchase this commodity. So you have NASA purchasing 5,142 actions. Actions, well, that's a little bit in the weeds for what we're going to talk about today, but those are activities of some sort that happened in that STEM sort. Okay, Department of Defense. Now, when you look at these, say the second one, Department of Defense, that's an agency. How do you contact the Department of Defense? I mean, there's many divisions within the Department of Defense. So the next sort is really more appropriate for developing a marketing strategy to go after your customers. And that is the contracting agency. So within the departments, who's really buying this commodity or service that I sorted for. And in this case, there's the contracting agency names. NASA is NASA, but actually the Defense Logistics Agency. DLA is a part of DoD and purchases in their own data, their own site called DIBS, electronically purchases pieces and parts. So if you're selling adhesives, that type of thing, widgets, that DIBS might be of interest to you because they buy a lot of different small type, repair type items on the DIB. And there's the Department of the Navy. So now we're breaking down the Department of Defense in something that's more reasonable. Okay, now the third sort you get. Now you get these sorts without asking for them. Just by what you search, you get this information. These are the top 10 vendors. Okay, now we're looking at competitors. These are the ones that already have whatever I searched for. They already have contracts with the federal government, and they're already in that ecosystem. So you could look at them as, hey, I want to see what they're selling because I want to go after their same customers. Or you could say, I know Zimmer US. Maybe I could partner with them. Maybe they're located in California. Maybe they're selling in Illinois, and they'd like to have a local partner to support what they're selling in Illinois. Okay, so these can be competitors, or they could be teaming partners, or they can be prime subcontracting relationships. So this is very good information to know. And in the path that you take with that, that's part of your marketing strategy that you'll be developing. Okay. Now, I want to move on to, again, how you filter the data. Okay. So this is a screenshot. I did that same search for adhesives that I did in USA Spending. Again, I got the top 10 departments, contracting agencies, and full legal business name. Now, I think the filters are easier to use on usaspending.gov, but I circle here the filters that you have access to start filtering this data. Now, a lot of the filtering can be from the advanced search feature. You see it circled up here at the top. So I took adhesives as my main search on the opening screen. The easy search, there's just a box and it just says, put it in here. What are you looking for? So I put adhesives in there. So then I said, well, I got thousands, literally thousands of awards. I'm just going to scale this down to 10/1 of 2023. So in other words, I used the fiscal year 24 and 9/30 of 2024. So now I scaled it down. Now I still got 39 or 36,916 results. But now I can use you see on the right side, the next red circle, I can use these filters here and start playing around with that piece of data, 36,000. Now, when I try to download this information and get some reports, I'm probably going to be limited to 30,000 line items anyway, but 30,000 is way too much to look at. I can filter this down into something that's more reasonable. So you can see here all the different ways to filter. And again, it's a matter of taking a look at what's most important to you. Where am I going to get the best data? I could search by my NAICS code if I know what my NAICS code is, product service codes, where the entity zip code, that kind of thing. That's the level of detail I can get to. Okay, so when you end up with results like that, and again, for small ticket items, I'm probably going to get a lot of results. Probably not going to see that many results in something that's not that plentiful, but still the filters are your friend. They are a very good way to make this more concise. So what most companies are challenged with in identifying their potential customers early enough to engage them, educate them on their offerings, and excel by getting ahead of competition. This is important because you will find once you get your target market, and once you start actually looking for active current solicitations, that the response time is very short. The reason for that is the agencies can do that and get quick, information back to them because of those businesses that have started engaging with them early on. The ones that have done the homework, like you're doing now, have taken the time to reach out to them and introduce themselves and understand what's coming. That's how they're prepared and their response can be done in that 2-week window. Okay. So that's the business development we're talking about. So what did we look at? We looked at SAM as current and near-term opportunities, but we looked at the data bank as the way to get that historic market research. Okay. We looked at expiring contracts and prior awards on USA spending. Another way to find information is through acquisition.gov. What that is forecasts. So forecasts and points of contact, again, that early on, that knowing what's coming, that ability to reach out in your market strategy to be able to say when talking to an agency, I see that you have an upcoming requirement for market research. We do market research and I'd like to present our capabilities because I see that in April of 2025, that is on your radar to purchase. The more you know, the more you educate yourself when you go in to talk to that agency, having that coveted meeting with a representative of the agency, you can't go in and say, I think you want to buy what I sell. You want to go in knowing that they buy it, how they buy it, and what is looking like maybe the next opportunity to sell that to them. Okay. So that is the third leg here on the stool, and that's your forecasts that are also telling you point of contact. Who is looking at making that acquisition decision within that agency? Okay. Now, I mentioned this before. This all culminates in the capability statement. And we're going to do our third session then on pulling this together. And that is really the introduction of your business to a potential agency, whether it's through, an initial contact with them, whether it's through a networking event, what it is, again, what's your unique value proposition? You're going to sell to that agency by a capability statement. Okay, so what are the steps to developing those leads in the federal market? All right, so we looked at which federal agencies are purchasing my product or service. How much are they buying? Have they awarded any set-asides? That's your women-owned, your HUBZone, service-disabled veterans, and your 8A program. Who are my competitors? Okay, this is what we should have seen in the market research. Again, we saw those top 10s. Who are my competitors and who holds those current contracts? And even to the extent we can see big picture, what the pricing is, what the market will bear, the government market will bear for those contracts. What were they willing to pay for that? And looking at also USA spending, what contracts are set to expire that I can compete for in the future? What do I put on my radar that I'm going to be going after those agencies at that period of time? Probably now to get ready for them. So these are the steps that we're looking at. This is the data we're building with those with the market research that we're doing. Okay, so really your plan is data driven. Okay, we're looking at what will they be buying? Is there a sustainable demand? What did we find in our market research? Does it really look like there's a market for us there? And what type of contracts are they using? We can look at, again, we looked at the open market, which is anything that they put out there on sam.gov, okay? With the exception of the set-aside, we can compete in that set-aside if we're certified in that way. Is it a GSA schedule? GSA schedules, those are limited to a business that has negotiated a schedule. We saw the GSA e-library. If you have negotiated a schedule, then any agency can buy from you. If your agency is purchasing off of GSA schedules, what does that tell you? that tells you that you need to investigate and potentially propose to the General Services Administration that you would like to have a schedule. And you make a proposal to them of what you want to put on the schedule, what the pricing is, understanding the pricing of your competitors, and you set that schedule up, and that closes that marketplace. So those agencies using a GSA schedule only be purchasing from those that have that schedule, which you can find again in that GSA e-library. Okay. The other is, well, what type of an open market contract? Is it, cost plus? Is it indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, where they're going to set it up and they're going to buy off of it at different times? You'll know that in your market research because you'll see task orders and delivery orders. That's almost like what we would consider a blanket order in the commercial marketplace. It's set up, order from you when we need it. We'll tell you how much we need, and when to deliver. Okay. That's important to know as well. Those can be good contracts. They're $0 when they come out, but when they order from you, that's when the money comes in. So again, those recompetes, what's going to be expiring. We talked about the government-wide acquisition contract. An example of that again is the federal supply schedule, and which agencies are buying and which offices are using that vehicle. How far in advance is that contract going to hit the street? Where are we going to find that? We're going to find that on acquisitions.gov. What's coming? That is the forecast that we're talking about. And when we can find the buying offices, again, filtering that down from the top 10 departments to the contracting agencies, we always want to do that. That's where we're going to start. Find out what agencies your competitors are selling to. And then that is also a good way to find your NACE code. Sometimes it can be confusing to figure out what do they consider an adhesive? What could be the NACE code or the product service code? If you're looking at a solicitation for adhesives, what NACE code did they use? That is a good guiding factor as to what the government feels that an adhesive is, what the NACE code is. So always look at those solicitations when you do a descriptive, a keyword, and coordinate that NACE code then with that keyword search that you did, because you want to make sure that when you search and more specifically when you set up your sam.gov entity registration, that you have those codes on a solicitation in your profile, because you need to have those codes in your profile if you're going to potentially bid on that solicitation. PSD codes are not mandatory. NACE codes are mandatory. Product service codes will drill down and you'll see those in the market data that you find. Product service codes can be more granular than the NACE codes. So the Department of Defense in particular will use product service codes to further define what they're buying. And really knowing your competition and what their contracts are that they are getting help you to develop what your plan is going to be for your market strategy. Okay, so be strategic, have a solid understanding of this federal market for your product and service. We're identifying key players. Again, we're trying to find those contracting offices. How are they buying? Their critical policies. Keeping an ear to the ground of what's coming, what initiatives, what budgets are out there. But again, we're looking at the end of the day for 3 to 4 agencies that we want to target and do all this, relationship building with a small number versus trying to be everything for everybody out there in the marketplace. Okay, so let's kind of see if we can pull this together here. What do we learn? What I'm hoping that you take away from this. We're going to first of all determine which agencies buy your product or service, and we're going to get to know them. That's going to be so important. Identifying the contracting procedures, the vehicles these agencies use, and the personnel that are making the buying decisions. That is as important as knowing who's buying as how they're buying. What contracts are they using? We need to be there for those contracts and set up to take those kind of contracts if that's the way your agency is purchasing. Find out the common dollar threshold or the product or service being purchased. Again, are they doing the majority of their purchases at the micro purchase level? Okay, that's less than 10,000. Do you take a credit card? You'll need to. If they're using a procurement card at that micro purchase level, then that's where you need to be. Now, are they doing the simplified acquisition threshold, which is that 10 to 250,000? Okay, that's small business. Great. That's a market that I can be in because I'm a small business. So I'm going to look to capitalize on that. Research the contract pricing the government's previously paid. Yeah, we're going to find that in the database. We can find that on GSA, a couple of different ways, but let's make note of that again. So if that contract pricing is lower than our expectations, maybe we're not going to be competitive in the government marketplace. And it's not a good place. Maybe we need to stay in the consumer or business to business marketplace because that government marketplace, that's just below my margins. Equally important to understand your competitors. Can't say that enough. And I want you to understand market research is continuous. This isn't just something you do till you get your first contract. You're going to be doing this on an ongoing basis. Your competitors are going to be doing it. And it doesn't stop when you launch. It really lasts for the entire time that you're going to be in the government space to understand what's going on with not only your competitors, but with the agencies. How are their needs changing? Okay, so again, the famous propensity. What is propensity? Drilled down to four simple who, how often, how much, and what type of contract. Okay, so if that's the main takeaway for today, when you look at your market research, this is what you want to understand. Who, how often, how much, and what type of contract vehicle are they using? Okay. And I mentioned early on, you know, part of what we do besides these training workshops are and webinars, are matchmaking events. I want to demonstrate here January 7th will be the second part of this series. And I mentioned it a couple of times, but we're going to develop a government market plan, building relationships with your target agencies and allies. So we're going to take what you've learned. So you have a couple of weeks to dig into these databases and find where we're going to start with those 3 to 4 target agencies, and then how do you connect with them? How do you build those relationships, actually get in front of them? So we're going to go into that in the next level in part 2. And then just as a preview, part 3 on February 28th, we're going to be talking about capability statements. And I mentioned that and how all important those are for marketing and introducing your businesses to those agencies. So we found the agencies in our market research. We are going to develop a plan on how to reach out to them. And our tool to do that in many cases is going to be that capability statement. Okay. And we're doing this in sequence, not only because it makes sense for the flow, but the hope is that you'll be ready to go on March 11th and March 12th for our second annual Illinois Government Contracting Summit. What this is all of the Illinois Apex Accelerators, all 11 across the state, bringing together resources, businesses, prime contractors, agencies. SBA will be there doing a certification clinic for us. But on those 2 days, we're going to help you with this knowledge and your preparation to make those connections with your capability statement and win those potential for those government contracts. So this is just to save the date. January 7th is set, February 28th is set, and March 11th and 12th, that will be in Forest Park, Illinois, and certainly hope that as many businesses as are ready to go can participate in that government contracting summit. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan for any questions that we may have, and I'm going to leave up here on the screen my contact information because I certainly hope you will follow up with me if you want to go through any of these databases and do a live demonstration with them, I would be happy to do that with you. Okay, Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. We actually don't have any questions submitted right now, but I do know that was a lot of information that just came at all of you. So I am going to drop in the chat, and then I will also put it in the follow-up email, the link to register as a client if you're not already a client of the Apex Accelerator. So if you'd like to speak with Kelly directly about any of this, or like she said, walk through some of these programs, you can do that as well. We just ask that you register first, and then we'll be in touch to schedule your first meeting. So if you review this recording, review this PowerPoint, and think of something that you wanted to ask but totally slipped your mind, or like I said, just a lot of information, you can meet with Kelly one-on-one, and those services are offered at no cost, just like our training sessions. So please feel free to register. And then as a reminder, I know we had a couple people jump on after I had already given my spiel at the beginning. You will receive a follow-up email later today with a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording. So you'll be able to review all of the information as you please. So any final comments or anything, Kelly, before we wrap up? Thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I thank you for hanging in there with me. And there's a lot of information there. But I'm here in my colleagues within the state of Illinois. Again, if you're outside of the central Illinois area, we are happy to help. And it's an introduction. It was at a 10,000 foot level, but we can certainly go into more detail and would look forward to doing that. So thank you. And I wish all of you happy holidays. And hopefully I will get a chance to see you on January 7th when we have our follow-up on developing a market strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.